Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in today, whether you're with one of our partners like our friends in Ashley, North Dakota, or at Westmo and rural Brandon, whatever has you with us today. I'm just glad you chose to spend a little bit of your week with us today. As we start, I've got a question for you. The question goes like this. Have you ever been stuck? Have you ever been stuck? Let me tell you a couple of times when I've been stuck. I was on a Boundary Waters trip with a friend of mine, along with his dad and his dad's best friend. And because we were all guys going up in the Boundary Waters, we decided we were going to go way deep into the wilderness. We had several portages that were over 2 miles where we lugged our canoe on these paths from one lake to another. And we got deep into the Boundary Waters. In fact, I remember one night we were miles and miles and miles from civilization. We got to this lake, and it was like the perfect lake. It felt as though nobody had been on this lake for eons. Few people had ever made it that far into the Boundary Waters. And so that evening, we set up camp, we went fishing, we caught more fish than we needed, we had a fish fry, we sat around the fire, we talked smart, we smoked cigars, we looked at the stars, we watched the northern lights. It was the perfect night in the Boundary Waters. Well, we crawled into our tents, and it wasn't but a couple hours later that we awoke to the sound of thunder. And with that thunder then came wind, and then it came some of the worst rain I've ever been out in the wilderness in. In fact, I remember at one point in the night, we were laying on our tent because the wind was so strong, we needed to lay spread eagle, and the water was rushing under our tent so rapidly, it felt like we were on a waterbed. There were trees. We heard trees breaking off and falling around us. In fact, we would later hear that a woman died in the Boundary Waters that night. Here we were, miles away from civilization, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a storm, in the middle of night. You see, we were stuck. Now, obviously, we made it out alive, but here's the question for you. Have you ever been stuck before? Another story about the Boundary Waters. A few years ago, my wife and my kids and I, we went up to the Gunflint Trail, and we stayed at Bearskin Lodge. It's this great old historic lodge there. It's located on East Bearskin Lake, which is this long, narrow lake. It's about 2.5, 3 miles long. And so one night, I decided I wanted to go fishing. My kids, my wife, they didn't want anything to do with it. So I hopped in this little boat, little 15-horsepower motor, and I went all the way to the far end of the lake because that's where they said the fish were biting. And so I got there. It took me a while to get there and dropped my lure in the water, and that's when I noticed something. I noticed the trees were sort of rustling at the top. Before long, they weren't just rustling. The wind was blowing, and that's when the sky quickly turned pitch black. There was a big storm coming through. And so I threw my tackle in the bottom of the boat as the wind started coming up and beating on the side of the boat, and I turned around to pull the cord on the motor, the cord that starts the motor, and as I pulled that cord, guess what happened? The cord came all the way out of the motor. And so there I was, about 3 miles from home, stuck. I held on to trees for dear life for a couple of hours till that storm passed. Then I realized I had an electric trolling motor and took that trolling motor. It took me home at about a half mile per hour. I got home after midnight, and my wife was worried sick. I was stuck. My question to you is, have you ever been stuck? One last Boundary Waters story. I was up in the Boundary Waters with my sister and my 2 brothers. We took a short trip, just a couple nights trip. We were getting towards the end of the trip, and we had to get back home. And so we decided to take this portage that wasn't necessarily well traveled. And as we got on this trail with the canoes over our shoulders, we realized it was wet. And it was getting wetter and wetter. Before we knew it, the mud was over our ankles. Soon it was at our shins. It was up to our thighs. People, before we got to the end of that portage, the mud was up to our chests. Quite literally, for a few moments, we were stuck. My question to you is this: have you ever been stuck? I start with all these stories, and I'm guessing some of you are hearing these stories and going, I don't ever want to go to the Boundary Waters with Pastor Hans. But the truth is, you've been there. You've been stuck. You ran out of gas, right? You had a flat tire. You went to a restaurant. You forgot your wallet at home. Or maybe more seriously, maybe you've been stuck in family troubles. Maybe for you, you're stuck in a dead-end marriage, a dead-end relationship, a dead-end job. Or maybe for you, you found yourself in a financial pickle. You see, I think we've all been stuck. But the reason I start with all this conversation about being stuck is I think there's something unique that we Christians face today. You see, when it comes to our relationship to the Bible, the story of Jesus, here's what I think. I think as Christians, we're stuck. We're sort of like, well, here's my son when we were doing a home improvement project. We're stuck. Let me explain. You see, here's the thing about the Bible. We all gather together as Christians on a regular basis. We come to church because we share something in common. The problem is, for most of us that call ourselves Christian, we're not all that comfortable with the story of Jesus, with the story that's found in the Bible. You see, we share something in common, but we aren't all comfortable with that thing we hold in common. And that thing we hold in common is Jesus. We feel squirmish with the story of the Bible. We feel a little awkward, a little uncomfortable. We're not so sure. In fact, the thought of reading the Bible, for many of us, it's sort of like when you were a little kid and you were at the end of the diving board for the very first time. Do you remember that? And you were about to jump in and your knees were knocking. And you knew that the moment you hit that water, you were going to be in way over your head. That's how it is for many of us when it comes to reading the Bible. We just feel sort of ill-prepared. And here's the thing about following Jesus, but not feeling comfortable with the story of Jesus. It's just plain awkward. I mean, it's sort of like if a vacuum salesman came to your door and talked about the weather and talked about your house and talked about his family, but he never actually talked about vacuums. It's like going to a professional baseball game. You get your peanuts, your Cracker Jacks. They announce the lineup. They sing the national anthem, but they never actually play baseball. That's what it's like following Jesus, but not feeling comfortable with the story of Jesus found in the Bible. It's sort of like water skiing without a boat. Now, some of you, I can tell, are feeling maybe a little bit of guilt, and that's not the intention of this conversation today. Because here's what I know. Many of you, you wish you knew the Bible better. You wish you were more comfortable. You see, the truth, when it comes to our relationship to the Bible, being stuck isn't your fault. I mean, no one made you comfortable with the story. In fact, nobody took your questions seriously. In fact, for some of you grew up in communities that said, no, the Bible is the pastor's thing. Well, even though people said this to you, I'm guessing at one time or another, you actually opened the Bible. And you opened it to the logical place, the beginning, just like every other book, and you started reading the book of Genesis. And you loved the story of Adam and Eve, the story of Cain and Abel. You read the story of Noah and the flood. You got introduced to Abraham. You maybe went on to Exodus, and you heard the story of Moses. You heard the story of the parting of the Red Sea and the 10 Commandments. But then you got to Leviticus, and things got weird, right? I mean, let's be honest. The Bible has some confusing stuff in it. For example, in the book of Leviticus, take a look at this. It says, don't tear your clothes or leave your hair uncombed. If you do, you will die, and the Lord will be angry with all the people. What's that all about? I mean, seriously, when you look at young kids today, they buy these ripped jeans. They're the reason we're all going to die, huh? Your mom, when she said you got to comb your hair before you go to school, she would have loved this one. Or how about this verse from the book of Leviticus? Do not wear clothing woven of two different kinds of materials. Those of you that grew up in the 70s and loved your polyester leisure suit, yep, this one's for you. Or how about this one? Do not practice fortune telling and witchcraft. Was that really an issue? Or how about this one? Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head. Guys, those of you that had a mullet in the 80s, yep, this one's for you. I mean, come on. The Bible, there's parts of it that are just weird. It's just confusing. And so for way too many of us, we've spent our lives sort of stuck. And here's what I want to say. There's good reason for this. There's good reason for you being stuck and confused when it comes to your relationship to the Bible, because there are some things about the Bible that nobody ever told you. For example, here's one thing. Nobody ever told you that when it comes to the Bible, it's not all for you. Did you know this? All of the Bible was not written with you as the intended audience. In fact, if we're really honest, probably no one's told you this, the Bible has 3 parts to it. There are 3 covenants that God made with God's people. The first covenant is this. It was a covenant that God made with an individual, and that was Abraham. That covenant was not for you. That part of the Bible was not written to you. The second part of the Bible is the covenant that God made with a nation, and that would be the people of ancient Israel. Also, that part of the Bible, it wasn't written to you or for you. But lastly, the third part of the Bible, what we call the New Testament, is the story of God's covenant with the entire world, with you and me. This is the part of the Bible that was written for you and to you. But the problem is we often think it's all for us, that we were the intended audience. And so what do? We take it all literally. We read it as though every last piece of it is written for us, and we forget something. I mean, here's something maybe you didn't know, that there are all these contexts that we have to think about when we read the Bible. There's the author's context, the situation that author was in. There's the context of the author's audience, who they were writing to. There's also the context of the characters that the author was writing about. And then the truth is, there's your context. You and me live in a context that's very different than those ancient people. You see, here's the truth. Nobody told you that it's not all for you. You were not the intended audience of all of the Bible. Here's another thing nobody told you that people did. They gave you sort of Sunday school answers to your grown-up questions. What do I mean by that? Well, you know the Christmas story. Whether you grew up Christian or not, everybody knows the Christmas story about Mary and Joseph, the donkey. They get to Bethlehem. They give birth in a barn. There are wise men that come. There are shepherds that come. Well, maybe when you were a teenager, you actually read that story in the Bible. And you know what you didn't find? You didn't find a stable. There's no mention of a barn anywhere in the Bible. Or how about this? You also asked the question, well, where did they get 3 wise men? Nowhere in the Bible does it say there were 3 wise men. It's just not in there. There could have been hundreds of wise men for all we know. Or how about this? You read the story of Noah, right? Remember that story? The rainbow, the boat, God saving all Noah and his family and all the animals. Well, maybe you read it when you were a teenager and you realized something when you read that story. That God was the one that destroyed the entire earth except for Noah and those animals. You also realize that Noah wasn't a perfect guy, because the first thing he did after he landed, what does he do? He gets drunk, and then his son finds him passed out naked. You see, the truth is, for many of us, you've always been given Sunday school answers to your grown-up questions. Here's another reason that the Bible is confusing and we get stuck. You've been told all your life that the Bible is God's rule book that's been sort of downloaded from heaven. It's like an instruction manual, like the instructions you got with that IKEA bed you bought. Remember, if you do this, then you do this, everything will be perfect. We're told that the Bible is sort of like 7 habits of highly effective people. The truth is, that isn't what the Bible is at all. It's no wonder that we're confused. It's no wonder that we get stuck. So here's what we're going to do. We're launching this series today because here's what we're going to do. Over the next several weeks, we're going to do this. We're going to read the Bible. Are you ready for this? We're going to read the Bible together. Turn to that person who's watching with you and say this. Say, he's talking to you, right? He's talking to you, right? We're going to read the Bible together. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to start not at Genesis, because that wasn't written for you. We're going to start with a portion of the Bible that was intended for you to read. And that's this, the book of Mark. The book of Mark is a fast-paced book. It's short. We know you're a busy person, but it tells the story of Jesus' love for people like you and me. And we're going to do this. We're going to help you get comfortable with the Bible in 3 ways. First off, we've got this worship series. We're going to talk about the Bible for the next 3 weeks. And we're going to talk about the story and get you comfortable with it. Secondly, you're able to get one of these. It's a devotion book we've put together. We got permission to print the entire book of Mark. We've divided into 21 sections. We've added some of my commentary, some of my notes. In just 2 or 3 pages a day for 21 days, you can read the whole book of Mark. We want you to have one of these. And lastly, starting tomorrow, on Monday, we have the Daily Dose. And each night, we're going to walk through the book of Mark together. Folks, we want you to get comfortable with the story of Jesus, because being a follower of Jesus and not being comfortable with his story, it just is awkward. We can do this. We're going to do it together. The book of Mark, for example, starts like this. This is the good news about, say it with me, Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. This is the good news of Jesus, the Messiah. How many of you know what this is? It's a compass, right? If you're a young kid, you're going, I've never seen one of those in my life. Compass, right? When I went to Boy Scout camp, I got a badge for orienteering. I used that compass to navigate my way in the wilderness. The thing about a compass is today we sort of take them for granted. We have GPSs in our watches and in our phones and in our cars. But what does a compass do? Think about a compass for a minute. It's always pointing what direction? It's always pointing north, right? It's always pointing north. I love this as an analogy for the Bible. You see, I think when we read the Bible, we need to remember that the Bible is like a compass. It's a compass that's always pointing us in a direction, and that direction is towards Jesus. It's always pointing us towards Jesus. Now, we get this confused because we sometimes think that the Bible is pointing towards us. It's trying to tell us what we should and shouldn't do. It's trying to tell us the sort of life we should live. It's trying to tell us where we're falling short and what we haven't done enough of. But that just isn't the case. The Bible is like a compass that's always pointing in the same direction, and that's pointing towards Jesus. And so Mark, at the very beginning of his book, he makes sure we're clear about that. He says, this is the good news about who? About Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. He's going to go on, and he's going to tell us how the prophets of old, even they, way back when, they did the same thing. It says this, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way, a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight paths for him. Hundreds of years ago, Mark says, Isaiah was pointing in the same direction. The Bible is like a compass that always points in the same direction. What direction is that? It's toward Jesus. Well, the story goes on. It talks about John the Baptist. John the Baptist was in the wilderness and preached that people should be baptized. John announced, someone is coming soon who is greater than I, so much greater that I'm not even worthy to untie his sandals. Again, they're all pointing to Jesus. And as we close the first chapter of the book of Mark, it says this: At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, a voice came from heaven. Say it with me: You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. Friends, as we read the Bible, I get it. It's confusing. And part of it, the reason it's confusing is there are some things that people never told you about the Bible. And one of those is that the Bible is sort of like a compass, if you will. It's like a compass that is always pointing not towards you and not towards me, not telling us how we should live our life and what we should do and how we're all falling short. The Bible's a compass, and it's always pointing toward Jesus. So we're going to do this. We're going to get comfortable with the Bible. Because the truth is, following Jesus, but not being comfortable with his story, is just plain awkward. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the Bible. It's going to be this compass for us. And it's going to point us in the direction we all honestly want. What direction is that? It's toward Jesus.
Quiet the voice of doubt again. Echo within me every promise. Let your word be louder than my fears. Speak to the point when I can't see. Lift up my head in every valley. Let your joy be greater than my grief. I have set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. Ooh, Jesus, you make a way when none is found. You tell the roaring oceans to bow. I believe you're moving even now, right here, right now. I have set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. I have set my heart on you. You have every part of me. I set my heart on you. You set my heart on you. Nothing will ever break me, ever slay me. All my hope in you. Nothing will ever shake me, overtake me. All my hope in you. Nothing will ever break me, ever slay me. All my hope in you. Nothing will ever shake me, overtake me. All my hope in you. I have set my heart on you. You have every
As we close our time together, I want to invite you to join me as together we pray the prayer our Lord taught us. Together we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Hey, gang, thanks so much for spending just a little bit of your week with us today. If you are new to Calvary, here's what I want to do. I want to invite you to get connected with us, to take maybe a little next step. Here's an easy way to do that. Just head out to our website, calvaryalec.org, and there hit the button that says sign up for emails. It's just a little step you can take to connect with us. Every Friday I send out a note just sharing all the ways you can get involved so you can get a flavor for who we are here at Calvary. Another way we'd love for you to connect with you, if you are in the Alexandria community, this week we start a new schedule. So this Sunday we start our new fall schedule, which includes 2 services here at the church, a traditional one at 8:30, a modern one at 10:30, and then also a Wednesday night service. We begin all our programming both on Sunday and on Wednesday nights for students and kids. If you have a student in your life, we'd love to connect with them. We also are doing Backpack Attack this Sunday. And so if you're in the Alexandria community, we'd love for you to join us for Backpack Attack at 9:30 between services. We're going to pack about 1,000, 2,000 bags of food that we give to the school district so they can discreetly place those bags of food in the backpacks of kids who are in need in our district. Last but certainly not least, we are in this series. It's called the Book of Mark. We want people to get comfortable with the story of Jesus as found in the Bible. For way too many of us, we feel a little uneasy about the Bible, and it's not your fault. We want to get comfortable, though. So here's the deal. We're going to help you do that in 3 ways over the next several weeks. The first is join us for this worship series. For 4 Sundays in a row, we're going to be talking about the book of Mark and helping you get more comfortable with the Bible. The second way you can get involved is you can get a book that looks like this. We got permission to put the words of the book of Mark in this book and publish it for you. And I've added some of my thoughts, some commentary, and some thought-provoking questions. If you'd like one of these, follow the instructions on the screen. And last but not least, join us each evening beginning on Monday, the 11th, for the Daily Dose. During the Daily Dose, we're going to be walking through the book of Mark. Over the next 21 days, you'll get the entire story. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in today. As we always do, we want to close with a time of generosity, a time of offering. At this time, we invite you to make your offerings. And here's the deal. It's your generosity that allows us to open the Bible to people for the first time. It allows us to launch all these programs for our kids and for our students. It's all because of you. So thank you. You can make your offerings in one of the ways on the screen. The first is simply to go to our website, calvaryalec.org, hit the button that says Give. The second would be to use that app on your phone, Venmo, or you can cut a check and send it to the address here. Or if you're not quite sure how to make your gift or you want to make a special gift, we'd love to talk to you about that. Give us a call here in the church office. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great week.